Hey everyone, tonight we begin with something that might shatter every romantic notion you've ever had about medieval dining. Picture this. You've been invited to what's supposedly the social event of the century, a grand medieval feast at a lord's castle. You're imagining something out of a fairy tale, aren't you? All that glittering cutlery, refined conversation, and delicate portions artfully arranged on pristine plates. Well, prepare to have those dreams crushed like grain under a millstone, because what you're about to experience would probably send you running for the nearest McDonald's. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the castle just as the sun begins to set, and immediately you're hit with the first reality check. That romantic notion of stepping into a warm, welcoming hall, forget it. The Great Hall is absolutely freezing. We're talking about a cavernous stone room with ceilings that disappear into shadow. And the only heat source is a massive fireplace that's doing its best impression of a black hole sucking up all the warmth and giving back just enough light to see the condensation from your breath. You're wearing your finest clothes, which in medieval terms means several layers of wool that smell like wet sheep, and you're already shivering before you've even taken off your cloak. The smell hits you next, and it's nothing like what you expected. Instead of roasting meat and fresh herbs, you're assaulted by a complex bouquet of unwashed bodies, damp stone, animal fat, and something that might charitably be called odor stable. The rushes scattered across the floor, those romantic medieval floor coverings you've read about, are actually rotting straw mixed with food scraps, spilled drinks, and things you really don't want to think about. Every step you take releases a new wave of aromatic horror, but the cold is just the appetizer to this disaster buffet. As you take your assigned seat, and yes, where you sit is determined by your social status, so don't even think about choosing. You realize there's no individual place setting waiting for you. No plate, no cup, no napkin, folded into a neat little swan. Instead, you're staring at a thick slab of stale bread called a trencher, which is going to serve as your plate for the entire evening. This isn't artisanal sourdough we're talking about. This is bread that's been sitting around for days, specifically to get hard enough to hold food without completely disintegrating. It's got the consistency of particle board and roughly the same nutritional value. The person next to you, let's call him Edgar, because medieval names were wonderfully predictable, leans over and explains the rules with breath that could knock a horse unconscious. His teeth, what's left of them, are stained black from wine and general neglect, and when he grins at you, it's like staring into a medieval nightmare. You'll be sharing everything with the people around you, he explains with obvious delight at your horrified expression. That trencher, it's communal. The cup, also communal. The knife, well, if you're lucky enough to have brought your own, congratulations, you're one step ahead of the game. If not, you'll be tearing at your food with your hands like everyone else. And speaking of hands, you quickly discover that medieval hygiene standards would make a gas station bathroom look like a sterile operating room. Before the meal begins, servants bring around bowls of water for hand washing, which sounds civilized until you realize this same bowl of water has been making the rounds to dozens of other guests. By the time it reaches you, you're essentially washing your hands in other people's dinner debris. The water is murky brown, with mysterious chunks floating in it that could be food particles or something far worse. The soap situation is even more dire. It is basically ash mixed with animal fat, assuming there's any soap at all. Most people just splash the murky water around and call it good, then wipe their hands on their clothes or the tablecloth. The seating arrangement itself is a masterclass in medieval social warfare. You're squeezed between Edgar, who appears to have bathed sometime during the previous season, and a stern-faced woman named Millicent, who keeps shooting you disapproving looks and muttering under her breath about proper behaviour. Across from you sits a knight who introduces himself as Sir Roderick, and who has clearly never met a bath he liked. His armour is gorgeous, all polished metal and intricate engravings, but underneath you can smell the accumulated sweat of someone who considers washing a seasonal activity at best. The first course arrives with great fanfare, carried in by servants who look like they've been running a medieval marathon. These poor souls are sweating profusely, which wouldn't be concerning, except they're handling your food with their bare hands and wiping their brows with the same cloths they're using to arrange the dishes. What appears before you defies every expectation you might have had about medieval cuisine. It's not the delicate, perfectly seasoned dishes you imagined. Instead, you're looking at what can only be described as edible architecture, elaborate constructions of meat, pastry, and other ingredients that seem designed more to impress than to actually taste good. Take the piece de resistance sitting in the centre of your section, a whole roasted peacock that's been carefully skinned, cooked, and then redressed in its own feathers to look like it's still alive. It's both magnificent and deeply unsettling, like someone decided to play a very elaborate practical joke on a dead bird. The cook has even positioned the head so the peacock appears to be surveying the room with what you swear is an expression of profound disappointment. The craftsmanship is undeniable, but you can't shake the feeling that you're about to eat someone's art project. But here's where things get really interesting. And by interesting, I mean potentially life-threatening. You reach for what looks like a reasonably safe piece of bread, only to discover it's crawling with insects. Not just any insects, but the kind that have clearly been having their own feast long before you arrived. There are beetles, some kind of larvae that you really don't want to examine too closely, and what might be weevils having a family reunion in the grain. Edgar notices your horrified expression and laughs, a sound like gravel in a bucket, explaining that a little protein never hurt anyone. He proceeds to brush off the bugs well, most of them, and take an enormous bite, crunching audibly. The sound alone is enough to make your stomach turn. The meat situation is even more alarming. Everything is either so overcooked it resembles leather that's been left in the sun for a month, or so undercooked you can practically hear it mooing. There's no middle ground in medieval cooking. It's either charcoal or raw, with very little in between. The pork in front of you has a distinctly greenish tinge that you're trying to convince yourself is just the lighting from the smoky torches, but deep down you know that's not the case. When you tentatively poke it with your finger, it's got a consistency that reminds you uncomfortably of wet clay. The chickiness, at least, you think it's chickiness, appears to have been cooked with all its internal organs still intact, and nobody seems to think this is unusual. Sir Roderick enthusiastically pulls out what looks like a liver and pops it into his mouth, like a medieval appetizer, making satisfied grunting noises that echo through the hall. The smell wafting up from the various meat dishes is a complex symphony of overcooked fat, questionable preservation methods, and something that might charitably be called barnyard essence. And let's talk about those spices everyone always mentions when they describe medieval feasts. Yes, spices were used extensively, but not for the reasons you think. They weren't trying to create complex, nuanced flavors like some medieval Gordon Ramsay. They were trying to mask the taste of meat that had been sitting around for far too long. That exotic blend of cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg isn't enhancing the natural flavors. It's performing a desperate cover-up operation. It's like medieval Febreze, except instead of making your living room smell fresh, It's trying to convince your taste buds that you're not eating something that died several days ago and has been decomposing slowly in a root cellar. The vegetables, when you can identify them, present their own unique challenges. The turnips have the consistency of wet cardboard and taste like they've been boiled in pond water. The cabbage has been cooked so long, it's lost all structural integrity and resembles green slime more than actual food. There are things that might be carrots, but they're so overcooked and overseasoned that they could be anything from parsnips to chunks of wood for all you can tell. The drinking situation presents its own unique challenges. The ale flowing freely around the table isn't the carefully crafted brew you might imagine from romantic medieval stories. It's thick, murky, and has things floating in it that you really don't want to identify. Some of the floating objects appear to be moving on their own, which is either a trick of the flickering candlelight or evidence that the brewing process included some very unwelcome additions. But here's the thing, you have to drink it because the alternative is water. Medieval water is basically a liquid lottery where the prize is dysentery and the consolation prizes include cholera, typhoid, and a dozen other diseases that would make modern doctors break out in a cold sweat. The ale might taste like it was filtered through dirty socks and aged in a barrel that previously held something unspeakable. But at least the alcohol content kills most of the things that would otherwise kill you. It burns going down, leaves a bitter aftertaste that lingers for what feels like hours, and has an alcohol content that would make modern craft brewers weep with envy or terror. Within minutes of your first sip, you can feel it hitting your system like a medieval sledgehammer. As the evening progresses, you start to understand that this feast is less about the food and more about displaying wealth and power. The lord of the castle isn't just feeding people. He's putting on a show that would make modern reality TV producers take notes. Those elaborate food sculptures aren't meant to be eaten. They're edible status symbols. The peacock isn't dinner. It's a statement that says, I'm so wealthy, I can afford to kill beautiful birds just to impress you people. And I have cooks skilled enough to make dead animals look alive again. The Lord himself sits at the high table, elevated above everyone else, like a medieval deity surveying his domain. He's dressed in clothes that probably cost more than most people's houses, and he's surrounded by the most important guests, other nobles, wealthy merchants, and church officials who look like they've never missed a meal in their lives. Every so often, he'll gesture grandly at the assembled crowd, clearly basking in the admiration and terror he inspires in equal measure. But the real entertainment begins when you realize how medieval table manners work. Everything you think you know about proper dining etiquette gets thrown out the window and trampled by horses. People are grabbing food with their hands, wiping their fingers on their clothes, the tablecloth, or occasionally on their neighbours, and engaging in what can only be described as competitive eating. The knight sitting across from you is gnawing on a bone with the enthusiasm of a starving wolf, making sounds that would be inappropriate in most modern contexts and probably illegal in several states. The woman next to you, Millicent, demonstrates the proper way to eat soup by slurping it directly from the bowl, making noises that sound like a drain clearing. When she's done, she wipes her mouth with the back of her hand and then uses that same hand to grab more food from the communal dishes. The concept of individual utensils is apparently as foreign to these people as the concept of personal space. Speaking of personal space, medieval feasts are basically an exercise in how many people you can cram into one room without technically violating the laws of physics. You're sitting so close to your neighbours that you're sharing body heat, whether you want to or not, and every time someone moves, it creates a domino effect of jostling that ripples down the entire table. Privacy is a concept that apparently won't be invented for several more centuries. The conversation, meanwhile, ranges from the genuinely fascinating to the completely insane. You're hearing first-hand accounts of battles that would make modern war correspondents question their career choices, political intrigue that makes current politics look straightforward, and daily life details that illuminate just how different medieval existence really was. Sir Roderick regales the table with stories of his latest military campaign, describing siege warfare with the casual enthusiasm most people reserve for discussing their weekend plans. But you're also listening to discussions about medical treatments that involve bloodletting for everything from headaches to heartbreak, agricultural techniques that seem designed to ensure widespread famine, and social customs that make modern etiquette look anarchic by comparison. Edgar explains with great confidence that the best cure for the plague is to drink your own urine mixed with crushed pearls, while Millicent nods sagely and adds her own folk remedy involving live spiders and prayer. The medical advice flying around the table would make modern doctors either laugh hysterically or weep uncontrollably. According to your dinner companions, most ailments can be cured by either bleeding the patient until they're too weak to complain, applying leeches to various body parts, or consuming concoctions that sound more like witches' brews than medicine. One guest cheerfully describes a recent tooth extraction that was performed with a pair of blacksmith's tongs and no anesthesia except for strong ale and the hope that the patient would pass out quickly. As the hours drag on, mines and medieval feasts could last for literally hours, sometimes extending well into the night. You begin to understand why these events were endurance tests as much as social gatherings. Your back is aching from sitting on a wooden bench with all the ergonomic design of a medieval torture device. There's no back support, the wood is hard as stone, and the bench is just the wrong height to be comfortable for anyone except possibly a medieval hobbit. Your feet are numb from the cold, despite the roaring fire that's producing more smoke than heat. The floor is so cold that you can feel it through your shoes, which are basically leather socks with delusions of grandeur. Your stomach is staging a full-scale revolt against the questionable food choices you've made, producing sounds that would be embarrassing if anyone could hear them over the general din of medieval merrymaking. And there's still more food coming. The servants keep bringing out new courses, each more elaborate and questionable than the last. There's something that might be fish, but it's been prepared in a way that makes identification nearly impossible. It's been covered in a sauce that looks like it was made from mud and tastes like it was seasoned with despair. The texture is somewhere between rubber and cardboard, and it leaves an aftertaste that lingers like a bad memory. There's a soup that appears to be moving on its own, which is either an optical illusion caused by the flickering torchlight, or evidence that the kitchen staff has some very serious sanitation issues. When you look closer, you realize the movement is caused by small insects that have taken up residence in the broth, swimming around like they're enjoying a medieval hot tub. Edgar notices you're staring and helpfully explains that the insects actually add flavor, then demonstrates by fishing one out with his finger and eating it with obvious relish. The dessert course, when it finally arrives, is a masterpiece of medieval excess. There are elaborate sugar sculptures that look like miniature castles, fruits preserved in enough alcohol to power a small engine, and pastries filled with ingredients you can't identify and aren't sure you want to. The sugar work is genuinely impressive, detailed, artistic, and probably representing more wealth than most people see in a lifetime. But the fruits are another story entirely. They've been preserved in what tastes like pure alcohol mixed with regret, and eating them is like consuming liquid fire that burns all the way down. And then there's the entertainment between courses. You're treated to performances by musicians whose instruments sound like they're being tortured by professionals. The lute player seems to be engaged in mortal combat with his instrument, producing sounds that make you question whether music was actually invented yet. The flute player appears to be having some sort of respiratory emergency, wheezing and gasping through melodies that barely qualify as music. The jesters provide their own unique form of entertainment, with humour that relies heavily on making fun of physical deformities, social status, and personal misfortunes. Their idea of comedy involves elaborate pratfalls, crude jokes that wouldn't be appropriate in modern locker rooms, and satirical songs about people sitting right there at the table. It's like dinner theatre, except the dinner is potentially poisonous, and the theatre is deeply questionable by any civilized standard. The storytellers are perhaps the most fascinating part of the entertainment, spinning tales of adventure, romance, and heroism that transport you to worlds of knights and dragons and impossible quests. But even their stories are peppered with casual violence, social assumptions that make you uncomfortable, and plot devices that wouldn't survive 5 minutes of modern analysis. The tales are captivating and disturbing in equal measure, offering glimpses into a worldview that's both alien and oddly familiar. The social dynamics at play are equally exhausting and fascinating. Every conversation is a minefield of potential offence, where saying the wrong thing to the wrong person could result in anything from social exile to actual physical violence. The person to your left is a minor noble who takes offence at everything from the way you hold your cup to the direction you're facing when you speak. He's constantly correcting your posture, your pronunciation, and your understanding of proper social hierarchy. The person to your right is a merchant who's desperately trying to climb the social ladder and sees every interaction as a business opportunity. He keeps trying to interest you in various trade goods, from exotic spices to luxury fabrics, all while dropping not-so-subtle hints about his wealth and connections. His conversation is a masterclass in medieval networking, complete with shameless self-promotion and thinly veiled bribes. The church officials add their own layer of complexity to the social dynamics. They're simultaneously the most educated people at the table and the most judgmental, offering commentary on everything from the appropriateness of the entertainment to the moral implications of the food choices. Their presence serves as a constant reminder that even fun is subject to religious scrutiny in medieval society. By the time the final course arrives, something involving fruit that's been preserved in what tastes like pure alcohol mixed with questionable spices, you're ready to tap out. Your medieval feast experience has been less magical dining adventure and more survival challenge with a side of food poisoning. You've consumed things you can't identify, drunk liquids that might have been fermented in someone's boot, and engaged in conversations that have left you questioning everything you thought you knew about medieval society. Your clothes are stained with food, drink, and substances you prefer not to think about. Your hair smells like smoke and grease. Your hands are sticky with things that no amount of that questionable wash water could clean. Your stomach is making sounds that suggest it's considering a complete revolt against your recent life choices. But here's the strangest part. Despite everything, the questionable food, the freezing cold, the dubious hygiene, the social complexity, the physical discomfort, there's something undeniably compelling about the whole experience. You're witnessing history in action, participating in rituals and traditions that have been passed down for generations. You're seeing how people lived, ate, and socialized in a world completely different from your own. The feast is winding down now, but the evening isn't over. There will be more entertainment, more drinking, and more socializing that could continue well into the early hours of the morning. Some guests will sleep right here in the hall, wrapped in their cloaks and using the straw-covered floor as their bed. Others will stumble off to whatever accommodations they can find, lucky if they have a roof and 4 walls to keep out the cold. As the evening finally winds down and you prepare to leave, you realize you've survived something that would have been considered normal, even enjoyable, by medieval standards. You've experienced firsthand what it meant to feast in an age where abundance was rare and survival was never guaranteed. You've tasted food that was prepared without refrigeration, without modern safety standards, and without any of the conveniences you take for granted. Walking back through the cold castle corridors, your stomach gurgling ominously, and your head spinning slightly from the questionable ale, you can't help but feel a strange sense of accomplishment. You didn't just survive a medieval feast, you experienced it authentically, complete with all the discomfort, uncertainty, and social complexity that made these events both memorable and, quite frankly, somewhat terrifying. The castle corridors are even colder than the Great Hall, if such a thing is possible. Your breath forms clouds in the air, and the stone walls seem to radiate cold like some kind of medieval air conditioning system designed by sadists. The torches provide barely enough light to see where you're going, casting dancing shadows that make every doorway look like the entrance to a medieval horror story. And as you finally escape into the night air, breathing deeply to clear your lungs of smoke and your nose of questionable aromas, you make a mental note to never again take modern food safety standards for granted. Because if tonight taught you anything, it's that the good old days weren't always as good as we like to imagine. They were cold, uncomfortable, potentially dangerous, and filled with experiences that would make modern health inspectors faint on the spot. But they were also authentic, immediate, and utterly human in ways that our sanitized modern world sometimes lacks. You've shared food with strangers, listened to stories that have been passed down through generations, and participated in social rituals that connect you to centuries of human experience. It's been uncomfortable, challenging, and occasionally terrifying, but it's also been utterly unforgettable. Tomorrow you'll wake up with a headache that feels like medieval warfare is being conducted inside your skull, a stomach that's still processing questionable decisions, and memories of an evening that will stay with you forever. And despite everything, despite the cold, the questionable food, the dubious hygiene, and the social complexity, you'll probably find yourself looking back on the experience with something approaching fondness. Because that's the thing about medieval feasts. They weren't just about the food, they were about community, celebration, and the very human need to gather together and share experiences, even when those experiences involve eating things that probably shouldn't be consumed by any reasonable standard. They were about displaying wealth and power, but also about creating bonds and memories that would last long after the last trencher was cleared away. The aftermath of the feast continues to unfold around you as the night wears on. Some guests have already succumbed to the combination of questionable food and potent ale, and they're slumped over the tables or curled up on the floor like medieval casualties of culinary warfare. Their snoring creates a symphony of medieval sleep apnea that echoes through the great hall, punctuated by occasional groans and sounds that suggest their digestive systems are fighting their own private battles. The servants, meanwhile, are beginning the monumental task of cleaning up after this medieval disaster. They're scraping trenchers, collecting bones that have been gnawed clean, and dealing with spills that have created abstract art patterns on the floor rushes. The leftover food will be redistributed according to strict medieval hierarchy. The nobles' leftovers go to their servants, the servants' leftovers go to the poor, and whatever's left after that probably goes to the pigs, assuming the pigs have stronger stomachs than you do. You notice that some of the more experienced feast-goers have developed survival strategies that escaped your notice earlier in the evening. Lady Margaret, an elderly noble who's clearly been through this rodeo before, brought her own cup made of horn and lined with silver, not for show, but because silver was believed to detect poison by changing colour. She's also been strategically choosing her food, avoiding anything that looks too fresh or too old, and sticking to items that have been thoroughly cooked, even if they taste like leather. Sir Bartholomew, another feast veteran, has been discreetly feeding most of his food to the hunting dogs that wander freely through the hall. These animals, you realise, serve as both entertainment and waste disposal systems, cleaning up dropped food and providing a convenient excuse for not finishing questionable dishes. The dogs themselves look healthier than most of the human guests, which tells you something about medieval priorities. The kitchen staff occasionally emerges from their domain, looking like they've been through a war zone. Their faces are red from the heat of cooking fires. Their clothes are stained with substances you don't want to identify, and they move with the exhausted efficiency of people who've been working since before dawn to create this elaborate display of medieval hospitality. When you catch glimpses into the kitchen through the service doors, you see a scene that would make modern health inspectors weep. Open fires, food stored at questionable temperatures, and preparation surfaces that appear to double as everything from cutting boards to animal grooming stations. The whole feast experience becomes even more surreal when you realize that this single meal probably cost more than most people earned in an entire year. The Lord is essentially burning through enough resources to feed a village for months, all in the name of displaying his wealth and securing political alliances. It's medieval, conspicuous consumption taken to its logical extreme, where food becomes a weapon in social warfare, and every bite is a statement about power and status. As the evening progresses into night, the conversation takes on increasingly philosophical and increasingly slurred tones. Edgar begins expounding on his theories about the nature of existence, which apparently involve a complex relationship between ale consumption and spiritual enlightenment. His words become progressively less coherent, but his passion for the subject remains undimmed even as his ability to express it deteriorates rapidly. Millicent shares her own wisdom about managing a medieval household, which involves strategies for dealing with everything from rebellious servants to grain storage to the proper way to preserve meat without modern refrigeration. Her advice is practical, hard-won, and occasionally terrifying in its implications about medieval daily life. She describes methods for detecting spoiled food that rely more on prayer than science, and remedies for food poisoning that sound worse than the original problem. The religious aspects of the feast become more apparent as the night wears on. Father Benedict, the castle chaplain, begins leading prayers of thanksgiving that seem designed more to ask forgiveness for the excess than to celebrate it. His Latin is impeccable, but his message is clear even to those who don't understand the language. They are all sinners enjoying sinful pleasures, and they'll need divine intervention to survive both the meal and its consequences. You begin to understand that medieval feasts weren't just social events. They were religious experiences, political theatres, economic displays, and survival challenges, all rolled into one. Every aspect of the evening serves multiple purposes, from the seating arrangements that reinforce social hierarchy, to the entertainment that delivers political messages, to the food choices that demonstrate both wealth and recklessness. The waste generated by this single meal is staggering by any standard. Bones pile up like medieval archaeology. Bread trenchers dissolve into mush from absorbing questionable liquids, and the floor becomes a carpet of food debris that will probably need to be completely replaced. The environmental impact of this one evening's entertainment would make modern environmentalists stage interventions, but in medieval terms, it's just another Tuesday night for the wealthy elite. Your own physical condition continues to deteriorate as the night progresses. The combination of rich food, strong drink, smoky air, and social stress is taking its toll. Your head is pounding with what feels like the beginning of a medieval hangover. Your stomach is making sounds that suggest it's considering a complete evacuation, and your back is screaming from hours of sitting on furniture designed by people who apparently believed comfort was a sign of moral weakness. The social obligations of the feast extend far beyond just eating and drinking. You're expected to participate in toasts that celebrate everything from the Lord's health to the success of recent military campaigns to the hope for good harvests. Each toast requires you to drain your cup completely, which means consuming more of that questionable ale while trying to maintain enough sobriety to navigate increasingly complex social interactions. The entertainment continues to evolve throughout the night. After the musicians and jesters, there are storytellers who recount epic tales of heroism and adventure. These stories, while fascinating, also serve as subtle political commentary and social instruction. The heroes always embody the values the Lord wants to promote. The villains represent threats to the current social order, and the morals of the stories reinforce the importance of loyalty, courage, and knowing your place in the medieval hierarchy. Dancing begins as the tables are pushed back, but medieval dancing is nothing like what you might expect from modern ballrooms. It's energetic, communal, and often involves movements that look more like organized combat than graceful artistic expression. The steps are complex, the pace is exhausting, and the physical contact involved would raise eyebrows in more conservative eras. You quickly discover that medieval dancing is another form of social bonding, political alliance building, and physical endurance testing, all wrapped up in the guise of entertainment. The musicians provide accompaniment that ranges from genuinely beautiful to actively painful. Medieval instruments produce sounds that are both familiar and alien, creating harmonies that sometimes work brilliantly and sometimes sound like musical accidents. The singers perform ballads that tell stories of love, war, and adventure, but their vocal techniques produce sounds that modern ears find challenging to appreciate. As midnight approaches, the feast begins to take on an almost supernatural quality. The flickering torchlight creates dancing shadows that transform familiar faces into medieval gargoyles. The smoke from the fires creates a hazy atmosphere that makes everything seem dreamlike and vaguely threatening. The sounds of the feast, conversation, laughter, music, and the occasional crash of falling dishware blend into a medieval symphony that's both captivating and overwhelming. You realize that surviving a medieval feast isn't just about enduring the food and drink, it's about navigating a complex social ecosystem where every interaction has multiple layers of meaning. Your conversations with Edgar, Millicent, Sir Roderick and the others aren't just casual chat, they're elaborate dances of social positioning, information gathering, and alliance building. Every joke, every compliment, every shared observation is being evaluated for its political implications and social appropriateness. The economic realities of the feast become more apparent as you observe the servants and lesser guests. While the nobles feast on elaborate dishes and expensive wine, the servants make do with scraps and leftovers. The social hierarchy is literally edible. Your position in society determines not just where you sit, but what you eat, how much you get, and even how it's prepared and presented. The feast also serves as a form of medieval theatre, where everyone is both performer and audience. The Lord performs his role as generous host and powerful leader. The nobles perform their roles as loyal supporters and sophisticated companions. The servants perform their roles as dedicated workers, grateful for their positions, and you're performing your role as honored guest, trying to navigate unfamiliar customs while maintaining your dignity and avoiding social disasters. The medical realities of medieval life become increasingly apparent as the night wears on. You witness several guests dealing with what appear to be chronic health conditions. Missing teeth, obvious signs of malnutrition, skin conditions that suggest poor hygiene, and movement difficulties that indicate untreated injuries or diseases. The casual acceptance of physical discomfort and disability is both admirable and heartbreaking, revealing a society where pain is simply another aspect of daily existence. The conversation turns to topics that reveal the harsh realities of medieval life. Recent deaths from diseases that modern medicine could easily treat. Crop failures that mean starvation for entire communities. Wars that devastate whole regions for reasons that seem trivial by modern standards. These aren't historical abstractions. They're immediate, personal realities that affect everyone at the table in direct and often devastating ways. As the feast finally begins to wind down in the early hours of the morning, you've gained a profound appreciation for both the complexity and the brutality of medieval social life. You've witnessed generosity and cruelty, sophistication and barbarism, beauty and horror, all mixed together in a single evening's entertainment. You've experienced firsthand how people lived, celebrated, and survived in a world where comfort was rare, safety was never guaranteed, and every meal was potentially your last. The cleanup process reveals the true scale of medieval waste and excess. Food that could have fed dozens of families has been consumed, destroyed, or discarded in a single evening. The environmental impact of this one feast, from the fuel burned to heat the hall, to the resources consumed in food preparation, to the waste generated by hundreds of guests, represents a level of consumption that would be remarkable even by modern standards. Your final observations as you prepare to leave include the sight of guests who've been completely defeated by the evening's challenges. Some have passed out where they sit. Others are being helped to their feet by more sober companions, and a few are discovering that medieval ale and questionable food create digestive combinations that require immediate attention to outdoor facilities that make modern porta potties look luxurious. The cold night air hits you like a medieval slap in the face as you finally escape the great hall. Your clothes are permanently stained with evidence of the evening's adventures. Your hair smells like wood smoke and cooking grease, and your body aches from hours of sitting on furniture designed by people who clearly believed that comfort was morally suspect. Your stomach is still processing decisions that seemed reasonable at the time, but now feel like acts of culinary recklessness. But as you walk away from the castle, breathing air that doesn't taste like smoke and medieval excess, you carry with you memories of an evening that was simultaneously wonderful and terrible, fascinating and horrifying, educational and traumatizing. You've experienced history, not as a sanitized museum display, but as a living, breathing, smelling, tasting reality that involved real people making real choices in a world where survival required different skills and different compromises than anything modern life demands. So the next time someone romanticizes medieval dining, you'll have a story to tell, a story about what it was really like to survive a medieval feast, complete with all the gory details that historical documentaries tend to gloss over. And you'll know with absolute certainty that sometimes the past is exactly where it belongs. Safely in the past, where we can admire it from a comfortable distance while enjoying our modern conveniences like food safety regulations, indoor plumbing, and the reasonable expectation that our dinner won't try to kill us. The Ottoman Empire's postal system, known as the Menzilhane, is simultaneously one of the most sophisticated communication networks in the world, and one of the most likely to get you killed in creative and unpleasant ways. You're not just delivering mail, you're maintaining the nervous system of an empire that stretches from the gates of Vienna to the shores of the Persian Gulf, from the steppes of Ukraine to the deserts of Yemen. No pressure, right? Your supervisor, A weathered man named Osman, who looks like he's been personally kicked by every horse in the empire, explains your duties with the enthusiasm of someone describing his own funeral arrangements. You'll be carrying official correspondence, trade documents, military dispatches, and personal letters across distances that would make modern logistics companies weep. Your route today takes you from Istanbul to Damascus and Mas, a journey of roughly 800 miles through terrain that includes mountains, deserts, bandit-infested valleys, and political boundaries that shift more often than sand dunes. You wake up before dawn in a cramped caravanserai outside Istanbul, and the first thing that hits you is the potent mixture of unwashed bodies, animal dung, and something that might charitably be called essence of centuries-old hospitality. Welcome to your new career as a courier in the Ottoman postal system, where delivering a single letter might take you across 3 continents and through more dangers than most people face in a lifetime. You thought being a mail carrier meant walking around suburban neighborhoods with a bag of letters and the occasional angry dog. Well, prepare to have that fantasy shattered like a clay pot dropped from a minaret. Your horse, if you can call it that, is introduced to you with all the ceremony of a state funeral. This particular animal appears to have been designed by a committee of people who had never actually seen a horse, but had heard one described by someone who was drunk at the time. Its name, according to Osman, is Yildirim, which means lightning in Turkish presumably, an example of Ottoman irony, since this horse moves with all the speed and grace of a particularly arthritic tortoise carrying a piano. The preparation process for your journey reveals just how seriously the Ottomans take their mail delivery. You're given an official ferman, a document bearing the Sultan's seal that supposedly guarantees safe passage through Ottoman territories. In reality, this piece of paper is about as useful as an umbrella in a hurricane, but it makes the bureaucrats feel better about sending you into mortal danger. The seal is impressive, though. Intricate calligraphy surrounded by ornate designs that probably took some poor scribe weeks to perfect. Yildirim has clearly seen better days, possibly during the reign of an earlier sultan, and his idea of rapid movement involves occasionally lifting his head to look around with an expression of profound disappointment. His coat is a colour that can only be described as brown adjacent, and he has scars that suggest he's survived encounters with everything from wolves to falling rocks to very large and very angry insects. The saddlebags you're given are marvels of Ottoman engineering, designed to carry everything you might need for a journey that could take weeks or months, depending on weather, bandits, wars, plagues, and acts of God or various local deities. Your cargo includes official dispatches sealed with wax and wrapped in oiled cloth, personal letters that represent months of savings for the people who sent them, trade documents worth more than you'll earn in a decade, and various packages whose contents you're specifically told not to examine under any circumstances. The weight of responsibility is crushing, literally. In the case of the saddlebags, which contain enough material to stock a small library. Every document you're carrying represents someone's livelihood, someone's family connection, someone's business deal, or someone's military orders. The official dispatches could contain anything from routine administrative updates to declarations of war, and you won't know which until you deliver them and see whether armies start mobilizing. Your first challenge comes before you've even left the city. Istanbul's streets are a maze designed by someone who clearly enjoyed watching people suffer. The roads wind and twist with no apparent logic, split unexpectedly into dead ends, and are populated by merchants, animals, pedestrians, and various wheeled vehicles, all operating according to traffic rules that seem to change hourly. Getting lost in your own starting city would be embarrassing under normal circumstances, but when you're carrying sensitive government documents, it becomes a potential career-ending disaster. One particularly thorough guard insists on examining every document in your possession, which would be fine, except that many of them are sealed with wax that bears official stamps, and breaking those seals without authorization is apparently punishable by everything from fines to imprisonment to creative forms of physical punishment that sound like they were invented by people with too much imagination and too little compassion. The city gates present their own unique challenges. The guards who check your papers have clearly been selected for their ability to make simple transactions as complicated and time-consuming as possible. They examine your firman with the intensity of scholars, studying ancient texts, debate among themselves about whether your seal is authentic, and ask probing questions about your destination, your cargo, and your personal history that would make modern security screenings look casual. Finally cleared to leave the city, you discover that the roads beyond Istanbul are less roads in the modern sense, and more suggestions about where other people have successfully travelled without dying. The Ottoman road system is extensive and well maintained by the standards of the time, which means it's only occasionally impassable and usually doesn't actively try to kill you. The main routes are marked with stone pillars that indicate distances to major cities, though these measurements seem to have been calculated by someone with a very optimistic view of both geography and the average traveller's endurance. Your first major stop is a Handa roadside inn designed to provide food, shelter, and security for travellers. These establishments are marvels of practical architecture, built like small fortresses with high walls, secure gates, and accommodations for both humans and animals. The Handa reach as evening falls looks impressive from the outside, but walking through its gates is like entering a medieval social experiment designed to test the limits of human tolerance. The sleeping arrangements at the hand challenge every assumption you might have had about privacy and personal space. You're assigned a spot in a large communal room where dozens of travellers spread their bedrolls on a floor that has clearly hosted thousands of previous guests and absorbed their collective essence over the decades. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, exotic spices, animal products, and various other substances that create an atmospheric cocktail that would make modern air fresheners surrender in defeat. The courtyard is filled with travellers from across the known world, Turkish merchants heading to Persia, Arab traders bound for European markets, Kurdish nomads moving their flocks to seasonal pastures, and various other people whose destinations and purposes remain diplomatically unexamined. The languages being spoken create a polyglot symphony that would fascinate linguists and exhaust translators, with conversations flowing seamlessly between Turkish, Arabic, Persian, Kurdish, Armenian, and dialects you can't even identify. Your fellow travellers include a spice merchant from Samarkand, whose samples have permanently perfumed his clothing with aromas that would be pleasant in small doses, but become overwhelming in the close quarters of the sleeping room. There's a military courier heading in the opposite direction who regales everyone with stories of his adventures that grow more heroic and less believable with each telling. A group of pilgrims bound for Mecca maintains a constant low-level prayer session that provides a spiritual soundtrack to the evening's activities. The bread is dense, substantial, and built to survive long journeys without spoiling, which means it has the consistency of edible masonry and requires significant chewing to break down into digestible portions. The rice is flavoured with spices that create complex taste profiles ranging from exotic and delicious to what did I just put in my mouth and how do I make it stop. The food at the Han represents the best and worst of Ottoman road cuisine. The basic meal, might, rice, bread, and some form of meat, is filling and generally safe to eat, assuming you don't ask too many questions about the age or origin of the ingredients. The meat is thoroughly cooked, which is both reassuring and concerning, since it suggests previous travelers have learned hard lessons about food safety through direct and unpleasant experience. The route from the Han leads through increasingly challenging terrain. The roads, such as they are, wind through mountain passes where the temperature drops significantly and the air becomes thin enough to make both you and your horse question your career choices. The paths are narrow, rocky, and positioned at heights that make looking down a test of both courage and stomach strength. Sleep at the Han is less rest and more horizontal endurance challenge. The communal sleeping arrangement means you're intimately acquainted with the sleep habits, personal hygiene choices, and digestive processes of complete strangers. The symphony of snoring, coughing, shifting, and various other nighttime sounds creates an audio environment that would make modern sleep studies impossible. The floor, despite layers of rugs and blankets, remains fundamentally floor-like in its hardness and its ability to identify every pressure point on your body. Morning brings new challenges as you prepare to continue your journey. The process of saddling Yildirim reveals that your horse has opinions about work schedules that don't align with postal service requirements. He demonstrates his displeasure through a combination of strategic non-cooperation, meaningful looks of disappointment, and occasional attempts to bite anything within reach, including you, the saddle, and what appears to be his own tail. Your first encounter with potential danger comes when you notice that Yildirim's ears are pointed forward and his pace has increased slightly, which for him represents a significant acceleration. Up ahead, the road curves around a rocky outcrop that could easily conceal mounted men with hostile intentions. Your training kicks in as you quietly check that your documents are properly concealed and your escape routes are clear, while trying to appear casual and unthreatening. The tension turns out to be unnecessary. The source of Yildirim's attention is a group of shepherds moving their flocks across the road, creating a traffic jam of biblical proportions. Hundreds of sheep, goats, and the occasional camel are flowing across the path like a woolly river, supervised by shepherds who view the entire operation with the calm patience of people who measure time in seasons rather than hours. Bandits are a constant concern on these mountain routes. The Ottoman authorities do their best to maintain security, but the sheer size of the empire and the remoteness of many routes make complete safety impossible. You've been trained to recognize the signs of bandit activity: unusual sounds, disturbed roadside vegetation, animals behaving strangely, but this training feels inadequate when you're actually traveling through terrain that looks like it was designed specifically for ambushes. Waiting for the flocks to pass gives you time to appreciate the stunning landscape around you. The mountains rise on all sides like natural fortresses, their peaks snow-covered even in the warmer months. The valleys between them are green and fertile, dotted with small villages that look like they've been carved directly from the mountainsides. It's beautiful, isolated, and exactly the kind of place where travelers disappear and are never seen again. At one checkpoint, a border official examines your papers with the thoroughness of someone who clearly has nothing else to do and all day to do it. He asks detailed questions about your cargo, your route, your previous stops, and your personal history that suggest either very high security standards or very low entertainment options in this remote posting. His office is a small stone building that serves as customs house, military outpost, and apparently his personal residence, all rolled into one cramped and somewhat aromatic space. The next section of your journey takes you through a region where the Ottoman Empire borders Persian territory, and the political situation is about as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. The local officials you encounter represent the Ottoman government, but their authority diminishes with distance from major cities, and their ability to guarantee your safety is more theoretical than practical. The terrain beyond the checkpoint becomes increasingly challenging as you enter desert regions where the road becomes more suggestion than reality. The markers indicating the route are spaced far apart and in some cases have been damaged by weather, bandits, or simply the passage of time. Navigation relies heavily on your ability to read the landscape, follow animal tracks, and maintain a general sense of direction that becomes increasingly difficult as the sun beats down and the horizon shimmers with heat mirages. Your encounters with other travelers in the desert reveal the international nature of Ottoman trade and communication. You meet a caravan of merchants from India, carrying silks and spices bound for European markets, their camels loaded with goods worth fortunes and guarded by men who look like they've never lost a fight in their lives. There's a group of pilgrims returning from Mecca, their faces glowing with spiritual accomplishment and their bodies showing the wear of months of hard travel. Water becomes a critical concern in the desert sections of your route. The Han are spaced according to the maximum distance a loaded camel caravan can travel in a day, which is considerably farther than a single traveller on an elderly horse can manage comfortably. You're carrying water in leather bags that develop leaks at precisely the moments when you can least afford to lose precious liquid, and the water itself takes on flavours that suggest the leather has been used for purposes you prefer not to consider. A particularly interesting encounter involves a courier travelling in the opposite direction, carrying dispatches from Damascus to Istanbul. His route is your route in reverse, and his horse looks exactly as tired and philosophical as Yildirim. You exchange information about road conditions, weather, bandit activity, and the quality of various Han along the route, creating an informal intelligence network that keeps the postal system functioning despite official communication channels. The desert Han, where you spend the next night, is even more cosmopolitan than the mountain establishments, filled with travellers from 3 continents and representatives of every major religion and ethnic group in the region. The courtyard resembles a miniature United Nations, with groups of merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, and various other travellers maintaining separate camps while engaging in constant trade, negotiation, and information exchange. The food at this Han reflects the international nature of the clientele, with dishes that blend Ottoman, Persian, Arab, and Central Asian influences into meals that are both exotic and familiar. The rice is flavoured with saffron that turns it golden and gives it an aroma that transforms the simple meal into something approaching luxury. The meat is prepared with spices that create complex heat patterns in your mouth, building slowly and then lingering long after you've finished eating. Sleep in the desert Han brings different challenges than the mountain establishments. The temperature drops dramatically after sunset, transforming the scorching daytime heat into cold that penetrates even thick blankets and makes you grateful for the warmth of your fellow travellers. The sounds of the desert wind, shifting sand, distant animal calls create an audio environment that's both peaceful and slightly unsettling. The final approach to Damascus takes you through increasingly populated and cultivated regions where the desert gives way to irrigated fields and gardens. The change in landscape is dramatic, from empty sand and rock to green fields, flowing water, and settlements that grow progressively larger and more prosperous as you approach the city. Morning preparation reveals that desert travel requires different strategies than mountain routes. You wrap your head and face to protect against blowing sand, adjust your water consumption to account for increased evaporation, and modify your travel schedule to avoid the worst heat of the day. Yildirim, meanwhile, demonstrates surprising expertise in desert travel, apparently drawing on experience from previous postal adventures. The final checkpoint, before entering Damascus, involves officials who are clearly accustomed to dealing with imperial couriers and understand the importance of maintaining mail delivery schedules. They examine your papers efficiently, verify your cargo seals, and provide directions to the local postal office where you'll deliver your dispatches and collect new ones for the return journey. The postal office in Damascus is a bustling hub of imperial communication, where couriers from across the empire converge to exchange dispatches, collect new assignments, and share information about route conditions. The building itself is impressive: stone construction with high ceilings, secure storage areas, and offices where officials sort and process the constant flow of imperial correspondence. Damascus itself appears on the horizon like a mirage made real, its minarets and domes rising from oasis greenery that seems impossible after days of desert travel. The city walls are massive and well maintained, speaking to both wealth and the constant need for defense in this strategically important location. The gates are busy with traffic flowing in all directions: merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, and travelers, creating a cosmopolitan crowd that represents the diversity of the Ottoman Empire. The return cargo for your journey back to Istanbul presents new challenges and responsibilities. You're carrying trade agreements that represent months of negotiation, military reports that could influence strategic decisions, and personal correspondence that connects families scattered across the empire. The weight of responsibility is even greater now, because you understand firsthand the distances these documents must travel and the dangers they'll face. Your time in Damascus also reveals the social and economic importance of the postal system to ordinary people. The personal letters you're carrying represent connections between merchants and their suppliers, families separated by career opportunities, and lovers maintaining relationships across impossible distances. For many people, the Imperial Postal Service is their only reliable connection to the wider world, making your work essential to both imperial administration and human happiness. Your delivery of the Istanbul dispatches is received with the professional efficiency of people who handle thousands of similar documents. Each seal is carefully verified, delivery times are recorded, and receipts are prepared with the bureaucratic precision that keeps the empire functioning. The officials handling your cargo treat each document with the respect due to potential history, because in an empire where communication often determines policy, every letter could be the one that changes everything. The return journey presents familiar challenges with new complications. The routes you travelled safely a few days ago may now harbour different dangers. The weather patterns have shifted, and your horse is showing signs of wear that suggest the return trip will test both your endurance and your emergency preparedness skills. But you're also carrying the satisfaction of successful mission completion and the knowledge that your work contributes to something larger than individual survival. As you prepare to leave Damascus and begin the long journey back to Istanbul, you carry with you a deeper understanding of the Ottoman postal system's role in maintaining imperial unity. You're not just delivering mail, you're maintaining the communication networks that allow an empire spanning 3 continents to function as a coherent political entity. Every successful delivery strengthens the bonds that hold this vast territory together, while every failure creates gaps in the imperial nervous system. The preparation for your return journey involves reprovisioning, equipment maintenance and route planning that takes into account seasonal changes, political developments, and reports from other couriers about current conditions. Yildirim gets a brief rest and extra feed, though his attitude suggests he views this more as delayed punishment than reward. Your experience as an Ottoman postal courier has revealed both the sophistication and the fragility of imperial communication systems. You've witnessed firsthand how empires maintain control over vast territories through information networks, how individual dedication keeps complex systems functioning, and how the simple act of delivering mail becomes an exercise in diplomacy, endurance, and survival that shapes the flow of history itself. You wake up in your third-floor apartment in a Roman insula, and the first thing you notice is that your bed is moving, not swaying gently like a ship at anchor, actually moving, bouncing rhythmically as the entire building shifts and creaks around you. Welcome to urban housing in the Roman Empire, where affordable accommodation means living in what amounts to an ancient death trap that makes modern building codes look like suggestions written by overly cautious architects with too much time on their hands. Your building, this towering monument to Roman optimism and structural engineering hubris, rises 6 stories into the sky and houses roughly 200 people in varying degrees of discomfort and denial about their living situation. You're one of the lucky ones. Third floor means you don't have to climb too many stairs, but you're not so high up that a fire becomes an automatic death sentence. The people on the 6th floor have resigned themselves to either dying in their sleep or developing leg muscles that would make gladiators weep with envy. The morning routine in a Roman insula begins with what can only be described as an architectural symphony of despair. The building groans and settles as people wake up and begin moving around, creating a percussion section of creaking timbers, shifting foundations, and the occasional small avalanche of crumbling mortar. The wooden construction materials that hold your world together were selected more for their affordability than their structural integrity, and they express their dissatisfaction through constant complaints that echo through the walls. Your apartment consists of one room, not one bedroom minds, one room, period. This single space serves as bedroom, living room, dining room, kitchen, storage area, and social center for your entire domestic existence. Roman urban planning operates on the principle that poor people don't need space, privacy, or structural safety. They just need somewhere to sleep between work shifts and tax payments. The room measures roughly 10 feet by 12 feet, which sounds adequate until you realize you share it with everything you own, everything you need to survive, and often several other people whose living arrangements have become temporarily complicated. The walls of your apartment are thin enough that you're intimately acquainted with the personal lives, sleep patterns, digestive habits, and relationship dynamics of everyone within a 50-foot radius. Roman construction methods prioritize speed and economy over sound insulation, which means every conversation, argument, romantic encounter, and midnight snack preparation becomes part of your personal entertainment system, whether you want it or not. Your upstairs neighbors, Marcus and Livia, appear to be engaged in an ongoing domestic dispute that involves throwing pottery, slamming doors, and having passionate reconciliations that make the building vibrate. Their relationship is more volatile than Vesuvius and considerably noisier. You've learned more about their personal problems than you know about your own family, and their sleep schedule has become your sleep schedule through the magic of paper-thin walls and enthusiastic arguing. The downstairs neighbors present different challenges. Gaius runs some kind of business that involves metalworking, which means your floor vibrates constantly from hammering, and the smell of hot metal and burning charcoal drifts up through the floorboards. His working hours extend from before dawn to well after sunset, because Roman labor laws are about as protective as a silk toga in a thunderstorm. The rhythmic pounding of his hammer has become the background soundtrack to your existence, occasionally interrupted by crashes that suggest either productive work or catastrophic failure. The building's plumbing situation represents Roman engineering at its most optimistically delusional. Your floor doesn't have running water. That luxury is reserved for the ground floor shops and the occasional wealthy tenant who can afford premium accommodations. Instead, you share a communal water supply that involves carrying heavy clay jars up 3 flights of stairs that were designed by someone who clearly never had to carry anything heavier than their own arrogance. The stairs themselves are another marvel of Roman practical engineering. They're steep, narrow, and worn smooth by thousands of daily trips, creating surfaces that are slippery when dry and potentially lethal when wet. The steps are spaced at irregular intervals that suggest they were built by someone with a very unusual gait, and the handrail consists of rope that has absorbed decades of sweaty palms and questionable hygiene practices. Water collection becomes a major part of your daily routine, involving multiple trips to the ground floor fountain that serves the entire building. The fountain itself is fed by Rome's famous aqueduct system, which is genuinely impressive until you realize that the water has to travel through lead pipes that were installed by people who thought lead poisoning was just a theory proposed by overly cautious physicians with too much education and not enough practical experience. The water you collect has a distinctly metallic taste that suggests it's been having intimate conversations with those lead pipes during its journey from the hills outside Rome. But it's clean by Roman standards, which means it's probably not going to kill you immediately, and it's free, which makes it the cornerstone of your domestic economy. You store it in clay jars that occupy precious floor space and occasionally develop leaks that turn your single room into a miniature indoor marsh. Cooking in your apartment challenges every assumption you might have about food preparation safety. You don't have a kitchen, you have a small brazier that burns charcoal and produces enough heat to warm simple meals, while generating smoke that would make modern fire marshals have nervous breakdowns. The brazier sits on your floor, surrounded by whatever fireproof materials you can afford, which usually means stones or broken pottery that you've collected from various sources. The charcoal you burn is expensive relative to your income, so cooking becomes an exercise in fuel efficiency that would impress modern environmentalists and terrify modern safety inspectors. You cook quickly, simply, and with constant awareness that one mistake could turn your home into a Roman barbecue with you as the main course. The smoke from your cooking fire has nowhere to go except through whatever gaps exist in your walls and ceiling, creating a perpetual haze that seasons everything you own with odor charcoal. Your typical meal consists of bread, olives, cheese when you can afford it, and whatever vegetables are available at prices that don't require selling body parts to afford. The bread is dense, substantial, and designed to fill stomachs rather than delight palates. It's baked in large communal ovens that serve entire neighborhoods, and by the time you get it home, it's already beginning the transformation from food to building material that characterizes Roman bread aging. The olives are a staple that provides both nutrition and flavor, though the quality varies dramatically based on your purchasing power. The expensive ones are plump, flavorful, and carefully preserved. The ones you can afford are smaller, saltier, and sometimes contain surprises that suggest the preservation process wasn't entirely successful. But they're filling, they keep well, and they add interest to meals that would otherwise consist entirely of bread and hope. Cheese represents a luxury purchase that requires careful budgeting and occasional minor miracles of financial management. When you can afford it, it transforms your simple meals into something approaching satisfying. When you can't, you make do with the memory of cheese and the hope that your financial situation will improve before you forget what dairy products taste like. The market where you buy your food is a sensory assault that combines the excitement of urban commerce with the reality of Roman hygiene standards. The vendors hawk their wares with enthusiasm that would impress modern advertising executives, but their preservation and storage methods would horrify modern health inspectors. Meat sits in the sun, vegetables are displayed without refrigeration, and dairy products exist in whatever temperature the weather provides. Shopping becomes an exercise in rapid assessment and calculated risk-taking. You examine food for obvious signs of spoilage, while recognizing that some level of deterioration is inevitable in a world without refrigeration. The vendors have developed sales techniques that involve emphasizing the positive aspects of their merchandise, while diplomatically avoiding discussion of any questionable characteristics that might be visible to observant customers. The social dynamics of your building create a vertical neighborhood where privacy is impossible and community involvement is mandatory. You know when your neighbors are sick, when they're fighting, when they're celebrating, and when they're engaging in activities that would be private in any other living situation. The building operates as an inadvertent commune where everyone shares everyone else's problems whether they want to or not. The ground floor of your building houses shops and workshops that provide both economic opportunity and constant disruption. The baker starts work before dawn, filling the building with the smell of fresh bread and the sound of ovens being stoked. The fuller operates a laundry service that involves chemical processes that create odors you can't identify and don't want to understand. The tavern stays open late, generating noise and customers who haven't quite mastered the art of quiet stair climbing. These commercial enterprises provide employment for some tenants and annoyance for others, creating economic relationships that are both beneficial and irritating. The baker's early morning schedule means fresh bread, but also pre-dawn wake-up calls. The fuller's services mean clean clothes, but also mysterious chemical smells. The tavern provides social opportunities, but also drunk neighbors stumbling through the halls at all hours. Your daily schedule revolves around the building's rhythm rather than your personal preferences. You wake when the commercial activities begin, eat when the cooking smoke won't overwhelm your neighbors, and sleep when the evening activities wind down. Privacy is achieved through timing and diplomacy rather than physical barriers, and personal space is negotiated through a complex system of unspoken agreements and mutual tolerance. The bathroom situation in your building represents Roman engineering at its most creatively inadequate. Your floor doesn't have toilet facilities. Those are located on the ground floor and serve the entire building population. The communal latrine is a social experience that eliminates any remaining illusions about privacy, while providing opportunities for neighborhood networking that you never requested and can't avoid. The trip to the latrine involves navigating those treacherous stairs while dealing with various levels of urgency and dignity preservation. The facility itself is a row of holes cut into a stone bench, with a channel of running water underneath that theoretically carries waste away from the building. The water flow is sometimes adequate, sometimes insufficient, and occasionally non-existent, depending on maintenance schedules and municipal priorities. The communal sponge-on-a-stick cleaning system represents Roman hygiene innovation at its most questionably practical. The shared cleaning tools are rinsed in a water channel that runs in front of the seating area, creating a sanitation system that would make modern epidemiologists question their career choices. But it's what everyone uses, so you adapt to community standards while maintaining whatever personal modifications seem prudent. Bathing presents similar challenges, since your apartment doesn't include washing facilities beyond what you can manage with your water jars and whatever privacy you can create in your single room. The building occasionally has communal washing areas, but these are usually occupied by people who have more legitimate claims to the space than you do. Most of your cleaning happens through creative use of small amounts of water and timing that avoids conflicts with neighbors who have similar needs. The public baths offer better facilities, but they require time and money that your daily survival schedule doesn't always accommodate. When you can afford the entrance fee and take the time away from income-generating activities, the baths provide not just cleaning opportunities, but social experiences that connect you to the broader Roman urban community. The various temperature pools, exercise areas, and social spaces create a temporary escape from the limitations of insular living. But bath visits are special occasions rather than daily routines, which means most of your hygiene management happens in your single room with whatever resources you can obtain and whatever privacy you can negotiate with your walls or optional living situation. Roman perfumes and oils become tools for managing the consequences of limited washing opportunities, though quality toiletries require financial resources that compete with food and rent. The economic realities of insular living create a constant balancing act between survival necessities and basic comfort. Your rent consumes a significant portion of your income, but finding cheaper housing usually means accepting even worse conditions or moving so far from employment opportunities that transportation costs eliminate any savings. The building owners know that housing demand far exceeds supply, so tenant protections are theoretical concepts discussed by philosophers rather than practical policies enforced by authorities. Maintenance and repairs follow the landlord's schedule rather than the tenant's needs, and the landlord's schedule appears to be based on lunar cycles, astrological events, or personal whims that don't correlate with structural necessity. When your roof leaks, you manage the water intrusion with whatever containers you can find. When your floor develops gaps, you stuff them with cloth or hope the problem resolves itself through settlement patterns. The building's structural integrity becomes a daily concern as you listen to the sounds of shifting timbers, settling foundations, and occasional small collapses in other parts of the structure. Roman urban construction prioritizes quick profits over long-term stability, and your building represents an ongoing experiment in how much architectural optimism the laws of physics will tolerate before demanding corrections. Fire represents the ultimate nightmare scenario for insular residents, and fire prevention becomes a constant preoccupation that influences every daily decision. Your cooking activities require careful attention to flame control and fuel management. Your lighting options involve oil lamps that provide illumination while creating additional fire hazards. Your heating choices during cold weather involve balancing comfort against the risk of turning your home into a Roman torch. The building's fire safety features would make modern firefighters laugh if they weren't too busy crying. There are no fire escapes, no sprinkler systems, no fire doors, and no evacuation plans beyond run toward the stairs and hope for the best. The narrow staircases that are difficult to navigate under normal circumstances become death traps when filled with panicked residents trying to escape smoke and flames. Fire prevention relies on individual caution and community vigilance, since professional fire departments are municipal services that focus on protecting valuable properties rather than residential buildings filled with economically marginal tenants. You develop personal fire response plans that emphasize rapid evacuation over property protection, because everything you own is less valuable than your life, and Roman fire moves faster than Roman firefighting. The social hierarchy within your building reflects broader Roman society in miniature, with economic status determining floor assignment, apartment size, and access to building amenities. The wealthy merchants on the second floor have larger spaces, better furnishings, and social connections that provide protection from landlord abuse. The poor labourers on the upper floors have smaller rooms, fewer possessions, and vulnerability to economic forces beyond their control. Your third floor position places you in the middle of this vertical social structure, with enough status to avoid the worst indignities, but not enough wealth to achieve real security. You navigate relationships with neighbours above and below your economic level, maintaining diplomatic connections that provide mutual support, while avoiding conflicts that could make your living situation even more challenging. The building operates as an unofficial welfare system, where neighbors help each other through temporary crises while competing for limited resources and opportunities. When someone gets sick, others provide assistance that ranges from sharing food to helping with work responsibilities. When someone faces financial difficulties, informal networks provide short-term support that helps prevent complete disaster. But this mutual aid exists alongside competition for everything from water access to stair usage to peaceful sleeping conditions. The line between cooperation and conflict shifts constantly based on individual circumstances, seasonal pressures, and the general stress levels that come from too many people living in too little space with too few resources. Your daily routine develops around building rhythms and neighbor schedules that create a complex choreography of shared living. You time your cooking to avoid overwhelming the already smoky atmosphere with additional combustion. You plan your water collection trips to avoid conflicts with neighbors who have similar needs. You schedule your personal activities around the noise patterns created by commercial enterprises and domestic activities. Sleep becomes a negotiated activity that depends on community consideration and personal adaptation to circumstances beyond your control. The building never completely quiets down. There's always someone working, someone arriving home late, someone dealing with sick children, or someone having relationship discussions that penetrate walls with enthusiastic efficiency. The sounds of urban Roman life filter through your windows and walls, creating an audio environment that ranges from entertaining to overwhelming. Street vendors call out their offerings, cartwheels rumble over stone pavement, animals protest their treatment, and people conduct business with volume levels that suggest either hearing problems or enthusiasm for public participation in private affairs. Morning in the insula begins with a crescendo of awakening activities as 200 people simultaneously remember that they need to eat, work, and deal with personal necessities before beginning another day of survival in the Roman economic system. The building fills with the sounds of preparation, water being poured, fires being lit, conversations being conducted, and the occasional crash that suggests someone's morning is not proceeding according to plan. Your own morning routine requires careful coordination with building resources and neighbor activities. You collect water during periods when the fountain isn't surrounded by other tenants with similar needs. You prepare food when your cooking smoke won't overwhelm neighbors who are trying to eat their own meals. You dress and organize your possessions while listening to the building's audio reports about community activities and individual circumstances. The transition from sleep to full wakefulness happens gradually as you adjust to the day's particular combination of building sounds, neighbor activities, and external urban noise. Your single room serves as both private refuge and community intersection, depending on the time of day and the current status of wall-penetrating sound transmission. As you prepare to face another day of Roman urban living, you carry with you the accumulated wisdom of insular survival, knowledge about water management, fire prevention, neighbor diplomacy, economic resource allocation, and personal space negotiation that represents a master's degree in practical urban anthropology. You've learned to find privacy in public spaces, comfort in minimal possessions, and community in circumstances that would challenge modern social workers. Your experience as a Roman apartment dweller has revealed both the ingenuity and the brutality of ancient urban planning, where housing policies prioritize profit over safety and comfort, where building codes were suggestions rather than requirements, and where survival depended more on personal adaptation than institutional protection. You've witnessed firsthand how ordinary people created livable communities within structural limitations that would make modern city planners question their career choices, and how human resilience can transform even the most challenging living conditions into something approaching home. You wake up in your mud brick house along the Nile, and as consciousness slowly returns, you become aware of a familiar sensation in your mouth. It feels like someone filled it with sand during the night, then added a few dead fish for flavor. Welcome to dental hygiene in ancient Egypt, where maintaining oral health involves ingredients that would make modern dentists either laugh hysterically or immediately prescribe therapy for whoever invented them. You thought ancient Egyptians had it all figured out with their pyramids and hieroglyphs. But wait until you discover what they considered proper tooth care. Your morning routine begins with what can only be described as archaeological excavation of your own mouth. The previous night's dinner has left deposits that combine with the ever-present sand, because everything in Egypt contains sand, including the things that shouldn't, to create a coating on your teeth that has roughly the texture of mortar and the appeal of week-old fish. This is actually an improvement over yesterday, when you had what appeared to be small pebbles stuck between your molars. The sand situation in ancient Egypt goes beyond mere inconvenience. It's a fundamental fact of existence that affects every aspect of daily life, especially oral hygiene. The desert surrounds you, the wind carries sand into everything, and even the bread you eat contains enough grit to slowly wear down your teeth, like a geological process. Your teeth aren't just tools for eating, they're constantly being ground down by the equivalent of edible sandpaper, which means dental care isn't just about cleanliness. It's about preserving whatever enamel you have left. Your first step in morning dental maintenance involves examining the damage from yesterday's meals. Ancient Egyptian food, while often delicious, is essentially a conspiracy against dental health. The bread, which forms the foundation of your diet, is made from grain that's been processed using stone mills that add rock particles to the flour. Every bite is like chewing on a sandwich filled with tiny pieces of gravel, and your teeth show the cumulative effects of years of this geological gastronomy. The tooth cleaning implements at your disposal would make modern dental hygienists question their career choices. Your toothbrush consists of a frayed stick, specifically a piece of wood from a specific tree that's been chewed on one end until it resembles a primitive brush. The bristles, such as they are created by your own teeth, mashing the wood fibers into something that might theoretically remove food particles if used with enough enthusiasm and prayer to the appropriate dental deities. The stick itself comes from the arak tree, which grows in the eastern desert and has natural antiseptic properties that make it superior to random pieces of wood you might find lying around. But superior is relative when you're talking about dental implements that look like they were designed by someone who had heard about toothbrushes but had never actually seen one. The preparation of your toothbrush involves selecting the right size stick, chewing it to the proper consistency, and hoping that the day's use doesn't result in splinters embedded in your gums. But the real adventure begins when you prepare your toothpaste, which ancient Egyptians approach with the same scientific rigor they applied to mummification, which is to say, they throw together various ingredients based on tradition, superstition, and whatever happens to be available, then hope for the best. The basic recipe you're working with today combines powdered ox hooves, burned eggshells, pumice, and myrrh, creating a paste that promises to clean your teeth while simultaneously questioning your life choices. The ox hooves require extensive preparation that begins with obtaining hooves from animals that have been processed for food. These aren't just any hooves, they need to be cleaned, dried, and then ground into powder using stone implements that produce a consistency somewhere between flour and very fine gravel. The grinding process takes hours and produces a substance that smells like a combination of barnyard and death, but apparently contains properties that ancient Egyptian dentists considered beneficial for oral health. Burned eggshells contribute calcium to your toothpaste mixture, which sounds scientifically reasonable until you realize that the eggs come from various birds whose dietary habits and health status are matters of speculation rather than veterinary oversight. The shells must be thoroughly cleaned, then burned in fires that reach specific temperatures to achieve the proper consistency. The burning process creates smoke that smells like sulfur mixed with disappointment, and the resulting powder has a texture that suggests it could be used for construction purposes if dental care doesn't work out. Pumice adds abrasive properties to your toothpaste that help remove stains and food particles while simultaneously removing tooth enamel with the efficiency of a geological erosion process. The pumice comes from volcanic regions and must be ground to the proper fineness mice too coarse, and it removes teeth along with stains too fine, and it's ineffective against the serious deposits that accumulate from Egyptian dietary habits. Getting the texture right requires experience, judgment, and acceptance that some level of dental damage is inevitable in the pursuit of oral cleanliness. Myrrh provides what ancient Egyptians consider the medicinal component of their toothpaste, along with a flavor that makes the whole mixture slightly less unpalatable. This resin comes from trees in distant lands and represents a significant investment in dental health that reflects both the importance of oral hygiene and the lengths to which people will go to avoid the consequences of neglecting their teeth. The myrrh must be ground fresh to maintain its properties, adding another layer of complexity to your morning routine. The mixing process requires careful attention to proportions that have been passed down through generations of Egyptian dental practitioners. Too much ox hoof powder, and the mixture becomes too harsh, potentially damaging tooth enamel. Too little, and it's ineffective against the serious deposits that accumulate from bread that's essentially edible sandpaper. The burned eggshells must be balanced with the pumice to achieve the right level of abrasiveness without turning tooth cleaning into tooth destruction. Adding liquid to create the proper paste consistency presents its own challenges. Water is the obvious choice, but ancient Egyptian water sources contain their own collection of minerals, microorganisms, and occasionally small fish that affect both the taste and the effectiveness of your toothpaste. Some practitioners prefer to use beer, which has the advantage of being safer than water and adding a more pleasant flavor profile, though it raises questions about morning alcohol consumption that ancient Egyptian social norms apparently don't address. The application process involves using your frayed stick to apply the paste to your teeth, then scrubbing with motions that combine brushing, scraping, and prayer to various deities associated with dental health. The texture of the paste creates a grinding sensation that suggests it's working, though whether it's working to clean your teeth or grind them down to stumps is a question that won't be answered until later in your life when you discover the long-term effects of ancient dental care. The taste of your homemade toothpaste defies description, combining the flavors of barnyard, sulfur, volcanic rock, and tree sap into a sensory experience that makes you question whether clean teeth are worth this level of oral assault. The myrrh helps, but it's fighting a losing battle against ingredients that seem designed to make tooth cleaning as unpleasant as possible, while still achieving some level of dental hygiene. As you work the paste around your mouth, you notice that it foams slightly, which ancient Egyptian dental theory suggests indicates effectiveness. The foam has a gritty texture that reminds you of the sand that's everywhere in Egypt, and it leaves a coating on your teeth that feels like it's either protecting them or preparing them for some kind of industrial process. The pumice provides the satisfying sensation of serious abrasive action, though you can't shake the feeling that you're literally grinding your teeth away in the name of oral hygiene. The cleaning process reveals the state of your dental health, which reflects the challenges of maintaining teeth In a civilization where bread contains rocks, sugar is a luxury item, and dental care involves ingredients that could double as construction materials, your teeth show signs of wear that would concern modern dentists, but by ancient Egyptian standards, they're holding up reasonably well considering the constant assault they endure from dietary and environmental factors. Rinsing after the toothpaste application involves using precious water to remove the residual paste, along with whatever food particles, tartar, and possibly small pieces of tooth enamel. The mixture has successfully dislodged. The rinse water takes on a disturbing colour that suggests the cleaning process has been thorough, though whether this is entirely positive remains to be seen. The taste lingers long after the rinse, creating a morning flavour profile that combines clean teeth with the memory of ox hooves and volcanic rock. Your teeth feel different after the cleaning cleaner, certainly, but also somehow more fragile, as if the abrasive action has removed not just unwanted deposits, but also some of the protective surface that keeps your teeth functional. This is the trade-off of ancient dental care. Effective cleaning comes at the cost of long-term tooth preservation, and the choice is between teeth that are clean but gradually disappearing, or teeth that are intact but covered in deposits that create their own health problems. The dental care routine extends beyond just tooth cleaning to include treatments for the various oral problems that plague ancient Egyptians, despite their relatively sophisticated understanding of dental hygiene. Tooth pain is a constant concern, addressed through remedies that combine practical medicine with religious ritual and wishful thinking. The treatments available range from somewhat effective to completely useless, with effectiveness often correlating inversely with palatability. For tooth pain, the standard treatment involves applying a paste made from ground carob, honey, and various herbs directly to the affected tooth. This sounds pleasant until you realize that carob in ancient Egypt often contains sand particles, honey attracts insects, and the herbs have been selected more for their availability than their proven medical properties. The application process requires holding the paste against the painful tooth while trying to avoid swallowing ingredients that might cause digestive problems to complement your dental issues. More serious dental problems require more aggressive treatments that would make modern endodontists retire early. Abscessed teeth are treated with procedures that involve drilling holes using copper implements that have been heated over fires, then filling the holes with various substances that are supposed to draw out infection. The drilling process is performed without anesthesia, beyond whatever alcoholic beverages you can consume beforehand, and the success rate is measured more by survival than by complete resolution of the dental problem. The tools used for these procedures reflect the intersection of ancient Egyptian metallurgy and dental ambition. Copper implements are shaped into probes, scrapers, and primitive forceps that allow dental practitioners to perform procedures that require both courage and a high tolerance for patient discomfort. The tools are sterilized using methods that involve fire, alcohol, and prayers to appropriate deities, creating a sanitation protocol that combines practical medicine with religious ritual. Tooth extraction represents the ultimate dental procedure, reserved for cases where other treatments have failed or where the tooth has become so problematic that removal is the only option. The extraction process involves tools that look like they were designed for construction work rather than medical procedures, and techniques that emphasize speed over comfort. The aftercare involves various poultices and rinses designed to prevent infection and promote healing, though success depends heavily on the patient's overall health and divine favor. The social aspects of dental care in ancient Egypt reveal both the importance of oral hygiene and the class distinctions that affect access to dental treatments. Wealthy Egyptians have access to better ingredients, more skilled practitioners, and more sophisticated tools, while poor Egyptians make do with whatever materials they can obtain and whatever knowledge they can acquire through observation and experimentation. The preparation of dental care ingredients becomes a household activity that involves the entire family in gathering, processing, and preparing the materials needed for oral hygiene. Children learn to identify the proper trees for toothbrush sticks. Women often specialize in preparing the various powders and pastes, and men typically handle the more physically demanding aspects of ingredient preparation, such as grinding pumice and processing ox hooves. The knowledge of dental care is passed down through generations, with families developing their own variations on traditional recipes based on experience, availability of ingredients, and personal preferences. Some families swear by adding specific herbs to their toothpaste, others prefer different ratios of basic ingredients, and some have developed entirely unique approaches to oral hygiene that reflect their particular circumstances and beliefs. The economic aspects of dental care reveal both its importance and its cost in ancient Egyptian society. The ingredients for effective toothpaste represent a significant investment that competes with other necessities like food and clothing. Myrrh, in particular, is expensive enough that its use in toothpaste represents a considerable commitment to oral hygiene that not everyone can afford on a regular basis. The seasonal availability of ingredients affects dental care routines, with some materials being more readily available during certain times of year. Eggs for shell powder are more abundant during nesting seasons. Certain herbs are only available during specific growing periods, and pumice must be transported from distant sources, making its availability subject to trade relationships and transportation logistics. The storage of dental care ingredients requires careful attention to preservation methods that prevent spoilage while maintaining effectiveness. Powdered materials must be kept dry to prevent clumping and mold growth. Organic materials need protection from insects and rodents, and the finished toothpaste must be stored in containers that prevent contamination while allowing access for daily use. Your daily dental routine also includes dietary considerations that affect oral health, though these are largely determined by what's available rather than what's optimal for dental care. The bread that forms the staple of your diet continues to wear down your teeth, regardless of your cleaning efforts, and the limited availability of fresh fruits and vegetables means that your diet lacks many of the nutrients that would support dental health. The social customs surrounding dental care create community knowledge sharing that helps individuals improve their oral hygiene practices. Neighbors exchange recipes for toothpaste, share information about where to find the best ingredients, and offer advice about treating dental problems. This informal network of dental knowledge helps compensate for the lack of formal dental education and professional dental services. The religious aspects of dental care reflect the ancient Egyptian understanding of health as a balance between physical and spiritual well-being. Prayers to specific deities are incorporated into dental care routines, protective amulets are worn to prevent dental problems, and various rituals are performed to ensure the effectiveness of dental treatments. The gods associated with health and healing are regularly invoked during dental procedures, creating a spiritual dimension to oral hygiene that modern dentistry has largely abandoned. The connection between dental health and overall health is well understood in ancient Egyptian medicine, with dental problems being recognized as potential sources of more serious health issues. The treatments for dental problems often include medicines designed to address systemic effects, and the prevention of dental problems is seen as an important component of maintaining general health and well-being. Your experience with ancient Egyptian dental care reveals both the sophistication and the limitations of early approaches to oral hygiene. The understanding of the importance of dental care is remarkably advanced, with recognition that oral health affects overall health and quality of life. The treatments available show genuine knowledge of dental anatomy and pathology, even if the methods seem primitive by modern standards. The ingredients used in ancient Egyptian toothpaste, while sometimes alarming to modern sensibilities, often contain genuinely beneficial properties that reflect empirical knowledge gained through centuries of experimentation. The abrasive materials effectively remove plaque and stains. The antiseptic properties of certain ingredients help prevent infection, and the mineral content provides some of the nutrients needed for dental health. But the limitations of ancient dental care are also apparent in the progressive wear patterns visible on ancient Egyptian teeth, the high incidence of dental problems in mummified remains, and the relatively short lifespan of individuals who relied on these early dental care methods. The trade-offs between effective cleaning and tooth preservation represent compromises that reflect the limited options available to ancient practitioners. As you complete your morning dental routine and prepare to face another day of eating sand-filled bread and dealing with the ongoing challenges of maintaining oral health in ancient Egypt, you carry with you both appreciation for the ingenuity of early dental care and relief that you're not entirely dependent on ox hooves and pumice for your long-term dental health. The experience has given you a deeper understanding of the evolution of dental care and a profound gratitude for modern dental science, even as you recognize the dedication and knowledge that went into developing these early approaches to oral hygiene. Your teeth, while clean by ancient Egyptian standards, remind you with every bite that dental care in the ancient world was a constant battle against environmental and dietary factors that modern dental patients rarely face. The sand in your food, the grit in your water, and the abrasive nature of your toothpaste create a daily challenge to dental health that requires constant vigilance and regular maintenance using methods that are both effective and potentially destructive. The morning routine of ancient Egyptian dental care represents a fascinating intersection of practical medicine, available technology, and cultural understanding of health and hygiene. It reveals a society that recognized the importance of dental care while working within the constraints of their knowledge, technology, and available materials to develop solutions that, while imperfect, demonstrated genuine concern for oral health and well-being. As you go about your day, the lingering taste of your ancient toothpaste serves as a constant reminder of the lengths to which people have always gone to maintain their health and appearance, even when the methods available seem questionable by modern standards. The experience of ancient Egyptian dental care connects you to thousands of years of human ingenuity, adaptation, and the persistent quest for solutions to universal health challenges that transcend time and technology.